The black sedan idled to silence as the porch light carved a small circle of gold. Ava's recorder hummed. Evan's fingers hovered on the deadbolt. Roo! Roo! Then 3 slow knocks. Open to the past or lock in the life she chose. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. Rain blew in sideways off Elliott Bay and soaked the cardboard in Ava's arms before she could reach the porch. She bumped the door with her hip, dripping, a thrift store denim jacket clinging to curves she'd tried and failed to hide. The man in the doorway was tall and solid, skin the colour of polished walnut, eyes steady and kind. "You're here about the room?" he asked, voice low enough to quiet the wind. "If it's still available." She pushed honey-blonde hair out of her eyes, breath-fogging. "I'm Ava. I can pay first month now." He glanced at the rain, at the frayed backpack strap biting her shoulder. "I'm Evan. Get in here before your boxes sail off." Warmth and wood swallowed the chill. The little craftsman in Rainier Valley smelled like fresh pine and lemon oil. Framed photos lined a narrow hallway. A boy in a dusty Little League uniform, an older woman grinning beneath a Sunday hat, Evan in fatigues with a squad beside a tan wall of sandbags. A hand-painted sign over the coat rack read, "Take care of the house and the house takes care of you." The room he showed her was small but clean, a twin bed tucked under a window where a maple pressed damp leaves to the glass. "Baths down the hall. Kitchen's yours as much as mine. I'm up early for job sites, so I move quiet. House rules fit on a post-it. Pull your weight, communicate, and no strangers stomping around at midnight." He studied her face, then added, softer, "You look like somebody who could use a quiet place to land." "Yes," she said too fast, heat rising to her cheeks. "Sorry, it's been a day." He nodded like he'd been through days that swallowed people whole. "You got supper?" She shook her head. "I made chili, not fancy, but it'll thaw you." He hesitated, as if offering more than dinner. "Welcome home, Ava." Home. The word went through her like heat. Later, alone in a room that didn't know her history, she counted what she had left. A cracked phone, a charcoal-smudged sketchbook, a bruised apple, and $380 in a soft envelope. She undressed in the glow of the street lamp and caught herself in the mirror. Thick, curvy, undeniably sexy, no matter how big the jacket. A soft waist and generous hips she used to starve into silence for photographs. No cameras here. No stylists. Just the sound of rain and a twin bed with a quilt that smelled like line-dried cotton. In the morning, she met the washing machine like it was a riddle. Detergent cap lines blurred into hieroglyphs. Evan leaned on the door jamb, amusement bending the corner of his mouth. "Which ones are colours?" she asked. "All of them," he deadpanned, then took pity. He showed her the small things, not too much soap, zipped the zippers, cold for darks. His hands were nicked and honest, a worker's hands. "You learn quick, you'll do fine." "I used to send it out," she said before remembering she wasn't supposed to sound like the kind of girl who sent things out. He didn't comment. "You will again, yourself." They fell into a rhythm that first week, unspoken as footfalls. Evan left before dawn with a steel thermos and a tool belt that clinked softly at his hip. Ava woke to the hum of the house settling and the far-off wail of the early bus. She walked to campus in sneakers that pinched, sat in the back row of Art History 201, and copied slide dates with an urgency that surprised her. In the afternoons, when rain softened to mist, she sketched people at the bakery window. She drew Evan once from memory, broad shoulders bent over a pile of lumber, patience written in his posture, and then tore the page out and tucked it into a book as if the drawing were an act of trespass. On Thursday, she left 420s on the kitchen table beneath a note. "First month. Hope it's okay. Thanks for the room." He came in with sawdust in his hair and a tired smile. "You could have handed this to me. Felt less awkward this way." He slid the money back across the table. "We said 400. This is 320. Her heart stuttered. "Oh, I'm teasing." His grin spread slow. "You look like you might pass out." She exhaled a shaky laugh. "I'm not great at this, any of it." "Most people aren't." He poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs and pushed one toward her. "You don't have to be great today. You just have to be here." She wanted to ask how long she could be here before the life she'd fled reached her, grim and elegant, in a black car with tinted windows. Instead, she wrapped both hands around the mug and said, "Thank you." They cooked together sometimes. He taught her his Aunt Renee's chicken and rice, how to salt with confidence, how to test doneness without cutting everything open. She taught him to make a shallow pan olive oil cake from a recipe she'd memorized under a different roof. "Your people rich?" he asked, kidding, when she cracked eggs one-handed like a pro. She swallowed. "My people are complicated." He didn't push, "Aren't we all?" At night, the house creaked like a body remembering old hurts. Ava lay awake, muscles unclenching by degrees, and let the old story try to claim her. Daughter of Grant Danvers, CEO of Danvers Dynamics. Danvers, whose razor smile made senators chuckle and editors lean forward. Danvers, who once told a room full of cameras that family was a sacred trust. She knew the script. She had tasted its nectar and its poison. She'd practiced saying a different last name in the mirror until it fit. Lane. Ava Lane. It was close enough to true to carry across a room. Saturday dawned clean. Evan hauled 2 buckets and a roller into the hallway. "You said you could use a project. I've never painted a wall. You've never lived until you've taped trim." He pressed a blue roll into her palm. "Start here. Make it straight like your life depends on it." "My life depends on nothing being straight," she muttered, but she tried, tongue peeking out the corner of her mouth. He didn't laugh at the first wobbly line. He straightened the tape with a gentle thumb and said, "There, good." They painted to the sound of a Motown playlist and the occasional yell of kids playing down the block. When her arm ached, she kept going. When her shoulders burned, he wordlessly traded her the roller for the brush. Sweat dampened her tea and traced the slope of her back. Evan noticed, the way a man notices the sudden, unarguable presence of someone he respects. He kept his eyes on the wall. She kept hers on the corner. The morning became afternoon. The hallway turned the colour of warm oatmeal and sunlight. During a break, they sat cross-legged on the drop cloth, sharing a bottle of water. "What's your major?" he asked. "Art history." The words came out small and full of relief. "It feels like opening a window." "Then keep it open." He flicked a paint dot from her cheek, then seemed to realize he'd done it and pulled his hand back with a sheepish little laugh. "Sorry." "It's okay." Her pulse had its own ideas. "Everybody's got somebody telling them to be reasonable," he said. "I had a sergeant like that. My grandma used to say, reasonable is just what people call you when your dream scares them. She sounds wise. She was steel and sugar." His smile softened. "Left me this house. Said, boy, make it honest and it'll take care of you." Ava looked down the new hallway, light pooling on wet paint, and imagined 2 futures colliding. The gilded one with no door handles on the inside, and this one, narrower, rougher, but full of air she could actually breathe. The first crack in the quiet came that evening, small as a text vibration. Her phone lit the kitchen table while she dried forks. Unknown number. "We need to talk." "Come home." GD, her bones, knew the initials before her eyes could deny them. The screen pulsed like a beacon. She flipped the phone face down and finished the dishes, hands steady, breath not. Evan scraped plates into the bin and pretended not to notice the king trying to enter her life through a 6-inch door. "You okay?" he asked finally. "Just spam," she lied. He didn't call her on it. "I'm making gumbo tomorrow," he said instead, "if you want to learn how to burn a good roux." "I don't know if I'll be home," she said, and hated the way it sounded like leaving. He nodded as if she'd said something brave. "Then I'll keep it warm." Later, when the house folded itself down for the night, she stood at the bedroom window and watched headlights sweep across the maple. A black sedan idled at the end of the block, then glided away. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the past turning the corner to find her. Ava lay down, heart drumming, and decided 3 things. She would not answer the text. She would tell Evan something true tomorrow, and she would learn how to make gumbo so dark it scared sensible people. Outside, the rain started up again, steady as a promise. Inside, in a small room with a clean quilt and paint drying down the hall, a life she'd chosen began to set. Evan started the roux like he was coaxing a secret out of the stove. Flour and oil in a heavy pot, slow circles with a wooden spoon. "You can't rush this," he said. "It's just like the good things. If you hurry, it burns wrong." Ava leaned a hip against the counter, the thrift store denim jacket abandoned on a chair. Steam fogged the window and drew soft halos around the morning light. She was all curves and contradictions in a faded tee and leggings, a body that looked like fullness and fight had made a treaty. "What colour are we aiming for?" she asked. "Moonless bayou," he said without looking up. "Right before your arm begs for mercy." She laughed. A real sound. "I'll get the onions." She reached for the knife, and he watched the way her hands hesitated for a beat, the way muscle memory failed where muscle had never been asked to work. He showed her how to curl her fingers, how to rock the blade. The air turned to pepper and promise when the trinity hit the pot: onions, celery, bell pepper, a hiss like applause. It did something to Ava, that warmth. Dinner had been the only time her father's house pretended to be a family. Chairs angled for camera-friendly sightlines, wine poured by a man who knew everyone's biography. No one ate seconds. No one asked for more. Standing in Evan's kitchen, stirring a stew that wanted attention rather than presentation, she felt hunger rearrange itself into hope. His phone rang. He killed the burner, wiped his palms, and answered. "Washington," he said, and listened with his jaw tight. "You're kidding me." He paced to the doorway. "The inspector was just there last week. We passed. What changed?" Another pause, longer, heavier. Okay, I'll bring the paperwork and meet him on site." He hung up and leaned his shoulder into the jam. "Trouble?" she asked. "City says my permit's missing a signature that's been there since Tuesday." He exhaled through his nose. "Sometimes they move the line just to see who stumbles." "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "I've danced this dance before. It's fine." He looked at the phone like it was a person he didn't trust. "You get a message last night?" She felt it then, the cold step of the text from the past. "Yeah." "You want to talk about it?" Ava watched his hands go back to the spoon. The roux hadn't burned. He'd turned the heat down while he took the call. He took care without speech. "My family expects compliance," she said, choosing words like stones across a river. "They don't like hearing no." "How old are you?" 20. "So, legal. You're no counts." He tasted broth and winced. "More salt. Hand me that." She did. "It's not that simple." "It never is," he said, not dismissing her, not pushing for details. "But in this house, your voice is enough." Something unknotted at the base of her throat. He didn't ask for names. He set a rule she could breathe under. They ate gumbo at the small table with spoons that clinked against the bowl, steam rising like prayer. When she closed her eyes at the first bite, he smiled into his bowl. "You can cook," she said, astonished. "Like actually." "I can build too," he said, as if those were the same skill in different weather. Monday slid in with damp shoes and a second mug of coffee. Ava took the bus to campus, forehead against the glass, water squirming down outside in lines. She had an 11 a.m. lecture in a dim hall where slides of Roman mosaics turned the room into a vault of haunted floors. She lost herself in tesserae and grout, in the quiet idea that someone with a patient hand could make a picture hold forever. When the lights came up, he was there near the door, wrong for campus the way a falcon is wrong for a parakeet cage. Navy suit. Earpiece, a jaw you could level a shelf on. "Miss Lane?" he asked in a voice that pretended not to already know everything. Her heart forgot how to count and then overshot. "You've got the wrong person," she said, the lie smooth from practice. He smiled like a gate. "We can do this politely, or we can do it at the dean's office." Ava walked past him with her eyes forward, choosing speed over grace. She cut through a knot of students, down the stairs, out into the wet air that smelled like cedar and new paper. She ducked into the art building, into the gallery where student work hung in brave, imperfect rows. She kept moving until she stood in front of an oil portrait of a woman laughing, mouth open, crow's feet proud. She put her phone on airplane mode and stood still until her breath agreed to be her friend again. The man didn't follow her into the laughter. She stayed on campus until dusk, moving from building to building like a ghost with a schedule. She texted Evan near 5, "Running late. Don't wait on me." She deleted and wrote instead, "Save me some gumbo?" Then she hit send and stared at the word save until it meant soup again. Evan spent the afternoon at the permit office, chin dipped, voice level, a soldier's patience on civilian errands. He emerged with a fresh stamp and the kind of polite apology that wasn't one. At the lumber yard, a guy he'd known for years shook his head. "Supplies tight," he said, "might be 2 weeks. Last week you said 3 days." Yeah, well, the man's eyes slid away. What changed? Nothing, he lied, which meant something. Evan loaded what he could and paid cash. On the way home, he saw Mrs. Dobbs from 3 houses down struggling with a bag of soil in the drizzle. He hoisted it without asking and followed her to the garden bed where her husband used to kneel before his knees gave up. "You take care of folks," she said, patting his forearm. "It'll come back around." He hoped so. He wanted to live where effort wasn't a rumour. Ava made it home with her hoodie up and her chin down. The house smelled like gumbo and dryer sheets. She stood in the doorway with raindrops shining on her nose and cheeks, and he looked up from the stove with that steady, unstartled gaze. "Hey! Hey!" she swallowed. "Someone was waiting for me after class." His shoulders lifted and set. "You okay?" "I am now." "You want me to walk you to campus tomorrow?" She shook her head. "They don't want to be seen. They want me to feel watched." He turned off the burner, wiped his palms again. A tell she was learning meant he was giving himself a second to think instead of charging in. "We can make a plan," he said. "You text me one word if you need me. Doesn't matter what I'm doing, I come." "What word?" "Rue," he said, and it undid her a little. How simple he made the hard things. They ate on the couch, knees nearly touching, the TV mumbling in the background about a council vote no one could afford to ignore. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door," she said, tracing the rim of her bowl with a thumb. "You didn't. Trouble knows all the doors." The doorbell rang. They looked at each other, then at the door, then at each other again. Evan stood first. "Stay here," he said, not like a command, but like the weather. He cracked the door with the chain on. A man in a rain-dark suit stood on the porch, umbrella dripping a slick circle on the mat. He held a thick envelope. "For Miss Lane," the man said. "She's not available. I'll leave it." The man slid the envelope through the gap like a magician's final card. He didn't try to see past the chain. He didn't look curious. He left as if this were more of the same. Evan locked the door, turned the deadbolt, slid the chain home, and stared at the envelope like it might hiss. Ava's name, her new one, was printed on a white label. No return address, no logo. He brought it to the coffee table and stepped back, hands empty. "You don't have to open it," he said. "I already did," she whispered, and he understood she meant something larger than paper. She broke the seal. Inside, a single sheet on heavy stock with 5 sentences that smelled like an office where people never sweat. "Ava, your absence has caused harm you cannot imagine. For your safety and ours, come home by Friday. A car will arrive at 7 p.m. Do not involve strangers. Some doors close permanently." GD Evan read it once, then again, then put his hand flat on the table like he could steady the room. "Strangers," he said softly, like it offended him. "Is that what I am in this story?" "To them," she said, "not to me." He nodded once, and the muscle in his jaw jumped. "You don't owe anyone your presence, not even family. They think I owe them my life. Then they don't know what life is." She folded the letter until the paper fought her, then slid it back into the envelope and pushed it under the couch with the side of her foot, like she could exile it to the dark. The house breathed around them, the fridge kicking on, the rain ticking at the window, the new paint down the hall drying into the shape of a simpler future. "Tomorrow," she said, more to herself than to him. "Tomorrow," he echoed. They took their bowls to the sink. In the last light, the black SUV she'd noticed before rolled past the house and kept going. Evan watched it through the slit in the curtain, memorizing its shape without knowing yet what it meant. He switched off the porch light, then switched it back on. Some nights, the bold thing is the softest glow you refuse to hide. Ava lay in bed with her phone on the pillow, the screen dark but the word waiting, Rooks, living between heartbeat and breath. In the room across the hall, Evan stretched the kinks out of his back and set his boots by the door in a line an inspector would approve. Neither slept fast. Both listened to the rain. Somewhere in the city, a powerful man read a report and circled a date. Somewhere in a small house, a woman decided that when morning came, she would stop running long enough to tell the truth. The letter stayed under the couch like a snake in a shadow, and Tuesday woke to a sky the colour of old pewter. Evan laced his boots by the door while the kettle sang to itself. When Ava came out in leggings and a big sweater, hair tied high and messy, he slid a mug toward her without comment. Steam rose between them, softening what had to be said. "I should tell you who I am," she began, and felt the ground tilt just enough to remind her of the drop beneath. "You already have," he said, "but if there's another layer, I can hold it." She wrapped both hands around the mug, as if heat could be courage. "My last name isn't Lane. It's Danvers. My father is Grant Danvers, Danvers Aerospace. If you've flown through a city where the terminals gleam, he put a plaque on it. If you've watched a senator shake a magnate's hand on TV, you've seen him in the background, smiling like a solution." Evan took this in the way he took a stubborn bolt. No panic, just a different wrench. His eyebrows lifted once, then settled. "Okay. I left because he doesn't hear my no," she said. "Because everything is a transaction. Because he called my body his brand when I was 17, and it took me 3 years to realize I could hate a word enough to leave a house built out of it." His jaw tightened, then loosened. "You're safe here," he said, and then, quieter, "No brand lives in my kitchen." A breath she didn't know she'd been holding left her. "They followed me yesterday on campus. They left that letter. Friday, 7 p.m., a car." He nodded, eyes on her face. "We don't do cars we didn't order." Something like a laugh tripped in her throat. "You make things simple." "I make doors thicker," he said, already standing, already fetching a longer strike plate and a handful of 3-inch screws from a coffee can by the tool bag. "Finish your tea." He replaced the flimsy metal that came with the door with steel that bit deep into the stud. He showed her how the wood grain ran, how the screws needed to bite past trim into bone. When he was done, he tugged the door twice, like testing a knot before you climb. "Better." "Thank you," she said, meaning more than hinges. He shrugged. "I had a grandma who made sure I learned which fixes matter." The day scattered them. Evan took the truck to Beacon Hill to meet an inspector who had discovered a missing signature on a permit that had never been missing until it mattered. He kept his voice level, produced a copy with the stamp, bright as a bruise, and got a reluctant nod. "We'll clear the stop work this afternoon," the man said, glancing at his tablet like it might absolve him. "Sorry for the confusion." "It'll be fine," Evan told himself in the truck, which had learned how to listen. But at the lumberyard, Reggie, who'd laughed with him since forever, had a new stiffness in his shoulders. "Back order," he said. 2 weeks, maybe 3. "Last Thursday you told me to come Monday." "Things change." "Reggie," Evan said, patience worn thin at the edges, "I'm framing a roof. Rain doesn't wait for your supplier's mood." Reggie's gaze slid. "I got pressures, man. Complicated." "From who?" A shrug. "You know how it is. Big fish don't like ripples." Evan paid cash for what they'd give him, and left with the truck half empty and his stomach full of a familiar taste. The metallic tang of being pushed by hands that never show. On campus, Ava ducked and bobbed through halls, not because she was afraid of the man with the jaw like a shelf, though she was, but because something in her refused to be herded. She sat in the back row of a seminar on Renaissance patronage and copied quotes about power wearing art like perfume. When class ended, she took the long way out through the student gallery, past a sculpture made of grocery receipts braided into a river. Her phone buzzed once with a number she knew by rhythm, if not by label. She put it back in her pocket. "Text me when you want eyes at the door," Evan had said that morning, and she had nodded, not promising, because promising felt like losing ground. She went to the library instead and lost herself in a book about quilts made by women whose names didn't make plaques, whose stitches told maps you could follow out of anything. At noon, a message popped up from an unknown email. "Your safety is compromised by those you trust. Do not involve the man you're living with. Come Friday. Some doors don't open twice." She stared at it until the words blurred, then took a photo of the screen, saved it to a folder she labelled plainly. Receipts. When she lifted her head, she caught her reflection in the window, full hips, soft waist, determined eyes, and felt a heat in her chest that wasn't fear. He can move inspectors. He can move lumber. He can move men in suits. He cannot move me, she thought, and surprised herself by believing it enough to stand. She took the bus to the International District and walked into a legal clinic with a plastic sign taped to the glass. Tuesdays, 2:05 p.m., free consults. A woman with silver curls and a sweater the colour of moss looked up. "How can we help?" "I'm being pressured by family to return home," Ava said, and listened to herself choose words that made the problem small enough to pick up. They've sent people. They've interfered with my roommate's work. Do you fear for your safety? Yes, she said, and then no, because the fear felt less like a fist and more like a rope. I fear for his livelihood and for my ability to choose. The woman nodded like she'd heard those exact weights before. I'm Tasha. We can draft a letter asserting boundaries, and we can document every contact. Stalking is a word with teeth when it fits. If they put hands on you or restrain you, we call it by its full name. We can also notify campus security. Powerful doesn't mean above the law. Ava sat with Tasha for an hour and wrote sentences that tasted like copper. She printed 2 copies and slid one into her backpack. On the way out, she texted Evan a photo of the letterhead and the line, "Met someone who knows which words bite." He sent back, "Good. I bought screws and spite." She laughed aloud on the sidewalk, and 2 pigeons startled at the sound. Evening softened the edges of the day, but it didn't unmake them. Evan came home with damp shoulders and eyes that had done too much counting. He set the receipts on the counter, an accusation no one deserved. Ava placed the clinic's pamphlet beside them, turnabout as fair as any play. "Tell me," she said. Supply dried up where it was plentiful. Inspector found a missing signature that wasn't missing until it was. He rolled his neck, a bridge between pain and relief. Someone's leaning. She reached across the counter and set her fingers lightly on his wrist. "I'm sorry." He turned his hand to lace their fingers, a simple consent. "Tell me about your day." "I ran, then stopped running. I met a lawyer who believes in paper. We can draw a circle around the house. We can tell your city and my campus that the SUV doesn't get to write its own rules." He nodded once, then again, the way he did when measuring twice before the cut. "Friday? I won't get in that car," she said. "But I'll meet him. Public place, witnesses, daylight." "You sure?" "I am." She lifted her chin. "He understands leverage. I'll bring mine." "What's yours?" "Myself," she said, and a refusal. They made dinner because hunger does not negotiate. He seared chicken thighs in a cast-iron pan and showed her how to listen for the sizzle that meant skin turning to gold. She tossed a salad with her hands, not caring if olive oil kissed her knuckles. Between the stove and the sink, they made a small country where the language was effort and the laws were kindness and clear expectations. After, Evan pulled out a folded paper from the pocket of his flannel. "Map," he said, spreading it on the table. Seattle at street level with bus lines like veins. He circled up bounded by bright flags and tourists. Pike Place, north entrance. Cameras, people, nowhere to box you in without a scene. She traced a path to it with one finger. 5:30, not 7. Our time. "I'll be a minute away," he said. "Not at your shoulder unless you say the word." "Rue," she said, and their eyes met over the map's geography. They went outside and replaced the porch light with a brighter one. He showed her how to wedge a dowel in the back window track. He talked about hinge pins, and she talked about how to not make eye contact with a predator. They stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house the way you look at a thing you love and tell it you intend to defend it. The SUV rolled by slower than traffic would require, then accelerated into the wet. Evan raised his phone and snapped a photo without stepping into the street. Ava didn't flinch, but she felt the click in her bones. Inside, she opened her sketchbook and drew the porch, then the map, then Evan's hands replacing the strike plate. When she drew his palm next to the letters serifed threat, she realized the scale of things had changed in her mind. The hand took up more space than the words. Close to midnight, the doorbell rang again. They both went still. The house held its breath with them. Evan motioned her to the hall and stepped to the door with a calm that had dirt under its fingernails. Chain on, he cracked it an inch. A bouquet stood on the mat, wrapped in black paper, rain beading on white roses like pearls on a bruise. No card in sight until he looked closer and found it tucked deep as a secret. He took the flowers in without opening the door, set them on the rug, and used a pencil to tease the envelope out. A single line in his hand, block letters that remembered her childhood. Friday. Don't make a scene. Ava stared at the roses, beautiful and wrong, and felt something in her choose. She picked up the bouquet, carried it to the sink, and turned the tap. Water thundered through petals until they lost their shape. She held them under until the stems bent, then let go. White turned to pulp in the drain. Friday, she said again, not asking, not echoing. Deciding. Evan reached under the couch and pulled the first letter out, placed it beside the wet card, then set his phone on top of both. He looked at her, the kind of look that builds a bridge before a river knows it will flood. "We go in our own names," he said. "I already am," she answered. The house hummed and clicked and settled. Outside, the street went quiet, the way a crowd does before a symphony starts. Inside, two people sat at a small table with a map between them and a plan like a plank set over a gap. They would cross it together, or not at all. Friday smelled like coffee and tide water. Ava braided her honey-blonde hair into something that would stay put and stood a moment in front of the mirror, steadying the shape of herself. Thick and curvy in dark jeans and a soft sweater, a body that had been measured for cameras but now belonged to its owner. In the kitchen, Evan clicked a new deadbolt into place like a period on a sentence. "You don't have to go," he said, not as permission, not as command. "You're allowed to let a letter rot." "I know." She slipped her phone into her pocket. "But if I don't look him in the eye, he'll decide I'm still a child, and children get managed." He nodded, the way a man nods when he hates the truth but respects it. He handed her a little disc. "Record," he said. "One press. It backs up to the cloud thing you set up with Tasha." She laughed once, brief. "Look at you, cloud thing. I learn when it matters." He reached for her hand, turned it over, and pressed his mouth to the knuckles, a touch so simple it shocked her heart into stillness. "Say the word if you need me." "Rue." "Rue," he echoed, and it felt like armor. Pike Place was every sound at once. Buskers drumming on overturned buckets, tourists squealing when a salmon arcs through air, gulls scissoring the sky. The brass pig at the entrance gleamed from 1,000 palms. Ava arrived early and picked a table outside a coffee stand where steam drifted like thoughts you could almost write down. She set her cup down and made herself take a sip. The recording disc hummed once, live, beneath her collar. A woman in a moss-green sweater, Tasha from the clinic, appeared at the next table with a paperback and a takeaway cup. She didn't look over. She didn't need to. Two students with cameras around their necks argued about aperture by the railing. A street painter dabbed blue into a horizon. Farther back, in the shade between a flower vendor and a sign for chowder, Evan leaned on a post in a way that made him look like he'd been posted there his whole life. He didn't watch her. He watched the space around her, which felt like being held without hands. The black car arrived on the dot of 5:30, because of course it did. Grant Danvers stepped out without waiting for his driver to circle around with the umbrella. He didn't need weather to move. He wore a rain-dark suit and the kind of smile people practiced in rooms with glass walls. Up close, Ava could see the newness at his temples, silver threading through, fatigue hiding where makeup couldn't bother to go. "Aveline," he said, using the full name that used to mean gifts and now meant conditions. "Ava," she corrected and heard her voice behave. "Have a seat." He did, after a glance at the chair, as if he expected it to recognize him. "You look well," he began, the way men begin when they want you to forget what happened between the last time and this one. "I was worried. You sent a car and a threat. I sent a car and a reminder." He folded his hands. His cufflink winked like a lighthouse. "You've made a point. I have listened. Now it's time to come home." She let the hush between them stretch until it held the shape of no. "Home is where my no counts," she said. "You built a museum, not a house." His smile hardened. "This phase—" "It isn't a phase. Has already cost you comfort. It is on the brink of costing you safety. I am safe. You are living with a man I have not vetted." He lowered his voice the way men do when they want to insult your choices and call it care. "A man who doesn't understand the world you come from." "Say his name," she said. Grant blinked. "Excuse me, say his name, if you're going to talk about him." He weighed the demand like a brief. "Evan Washington." "Good," she said softly. "Now we're in the same room." He made a little sound that was almost a laugh. "You've always been dramatic. And you've always preferred an audience that can't answer back." She pulled a folded paper from her bag and slid it across the table. "This is a letter from my attorney." "Attorney?" He lifted one brow. "A public clinic intern with a sweater? She knows where the teeth are," Ava said. It documents your contacts, the car you sent, the men you placed at my campus. It asserts boundaries. If you continue, it becomes the first exhibit in a petition for a protection order. You would take your father to court? If he makes it necessary, she said. I hope he doesn't. Grant's gaze flicked past her shoulder, to the crowd, to the cameras, to the woman with the book who had not turned a page. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, a small stalling. You're better than this, Aveline. Better than insisting on my own life. That's the first compliment you've given me in years. She leaned in before he could retake the ground. You will stop contacting me. You will stop contacting anyone you believe to be associated with me. You will not interfere with Mr. Washington's work. You will not ask anyone to do it for you. He steepled his fingers. And if I refuse? Then you will find the law is less impressed by your checks than your board is, she said, and let the disc at her collar hum louder in her head. Also, the internet exists, and I've learned how to use it for something other than charity photos. He studied her like a merger, looking for the weak column. You're 20, he said finally, as if the number were a lever. You are making decisions with a hot mind. Come home. Finish your degree. I'll put you in the museum program in Florence for spring term. You love Florence. I love the Uffizi, she said. You loved the photos of me in Florence. Her throat burned, but she didn't let the heat reach her eyes. I am not going anywhere with your name on the ticket. Something twitched along his jaw. Do you understand what you're choosing? His voice dropped to winter. You are choosing uncertainty over certainty. You are choosing a man with a tool belt and a temper. His temper is kinder than your composure, over a father who has given you everything. You gave me access, she said, and the words surprised her with their calm. A life is something else. I'm building one. He leaned back, assessed angles. Somewhere inside his gaze, math happened. Is he in love with you? He asked, or with the idea of rescuing you? Neither, Ava said. He doesn't rescue. He shelters. There's a difference. Grant let the silence sit again, the way some men use quiet like a cane. Then he leaned forward with a soft, lethal smile. He will fail. Maybe, she said. But he'll fail honest. You will come to me, he said, voice returning to the boardroom. When that happens, when you learn what the word mortgage feels like at midnight, when you are tired of counting dollars and excuses, you will come to me. No, Ava said, and it felt like a hinge catching in the right spot. When I need help, I will ask people who see me. And if we run out of money, I will sell my paintings. And if those don't sell, I will work 3 jobs. I have hands, not just a last name. Your hands, he said softly, a memory flicking across his face of photographs and contracts, have always been expensive. Not anymore, she said. He reached across the table. Reflex lifted her spine. She didn't lean back. He took her coffee cup and moved it 2 inches, an old maneuver, control disguised as tidiness. A car will not come tonight, he said. You've made sure this would be seen. You've always known where to place a stage. I placed a table, she said. That's all. He stood. The gulls shouted like they knew a scene when they saw one. Aveline, he said, his voice dropping into the shape of a blessing and a curse. Doors are real. Some close. I know, she said. I'm choosing which ones. A hand touched her shoulder, gentle. Evan, silent as a thought, had stepped close at last, drawn not by panic but by the moment she chose to end it. He didn't glare, he didn't puff. He simply stood. And suddenly Grant Danvers looked like a man in front of a house he did not own. This is Mr. Washington, I assume, Grant said, not offering a hand, the barest tilt of head acknowledging a person rather than a category. It is, Ava said. Evan, this is my father. Evan nodded once. Sir, Mr. Washington, Grant returned. The words he was not saying crowded the air between them like uninvited guests. Not enough, not like us, not forever. Evan kept his hands by his sides. His presence said all the rest. Enough, exactly us, as long as it takes. Tasha stood, closed her book and drifted toward the far railing where the camera-necked students had just discovered a better angle. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. The market had eyes. Grant adjusted his cufflinks like a man adjusting the weather. I will not make a scene, he said, which meant he had wanted to. But, Aveline, understand me. The world you are choosing is not romantic. It bites. It leaves marks. It also heals, she said. You taught me how to survive a room. He's teaching me how to live in one. Grant exhaled through his nose, a father hiding a king's glare. "You sound like your mother when she had not yet learned the price of beauty." "She died before I learned the price of lies," Ava replied, and watched the words land where she meant them to. He flinched. Just once. Enough. The driver appeared with the umbrella. Grant didn't take it. He looked at his daughter a moment longer, as if searching for a clause he could litigate later, then turned and went. The car's door thudded shut like punctuation. Ava's legs loosened all at once. Evan was already there, the way he had been all day, slightly behind, deeply beside. "Breathe," he murmured. She did, and the breath came like weather moving off. Her hands started to shake, and then decided not to. Tasha drifted close enough to lay a card on the table. "Good boundaries," she said low. "Call me if he tries anything in the next 72. Tonight you eat. Tomorrow you document." "Thank you," Ava said. "You did the heavy lift." Tasha's eyes softened. "That recording caught what it needed to." She nodded at Evan. "You did good too." "Standing still's not nothing," he said. "Most men confuse moving with protecting," Tasha replied. "You didn't." She winked and was gone, swallowed by flowers and fish and Friday. They walked toward the edge of the market, where the railing lets you pretend the city ends in a line of green water. He took her hand, not for balance, but to remind both of them where the other was. "I thought I might throw up on his shoes," she said, and the laugh that followed was wild and clean. "You didn't." Evan studied her profile, the stubborn elegance of it. "You were you." "I was." She stopped and turned, set both palms on his chest. "You saw me." "I liked what I saw," he said simply. The bay breathed in. The bay breathed out. The gulls seemed to accept that no one was going to feed them drama. When they made it back to the truck, a note waited under the wiper. No signature, just 2 words in a familiar hand. "Doors close." Evan took a photo before he tore the paper in half, then in half again, the pieces small as excuses. "He's listening," he said. "He'll try different angles." "He always did," she said. "So will we." At home, the porch light they'd replaced cast a better circle. Inside, the house had remembered how to be a house, not a bunker. Ava set the recorder on the table, eyes shining in that after-battle way that wasn't quite victory and wasn't defeat. Evan pulled onions, celery, and bell pepper from the fridge. "Roux?" she asked, a smile beginning. "Roux," he said, and handed her the spoon. They cooked until the colour was the night in a pot, until the room smelled like choices you'd be glad you made tomorrow. The phone buzzed and they let it. It could be silence practicing. It could be noise trying to get in. Either way, they ate. Later, when the house settled and the map still lay folded on the counter, a new text arrived from an unknown number. "You have set terms. I have heard them. There are other ways to learn the cost of stubbornness." Ava looked at the words until their power drained like rainwater through a grate. She forwarded the message to Tasha into a folder named with her own hands. Then she put the phone face down and leaned into Evan's shoulder. "What now?" he asked. "Now we keep living," she said, "and we get ready." "For what?" "For the door we chose to open." The week after, Pike Place moved like weather that had made up its mind. The SUV stopped idling at the corner. The letters stopped arriving. The quiet felt less like mercy and more like a pause before another wave, but it was wide enough to breathe. It didn't mean the pressure vanished. 2 clients called Evan on Monday with voices that apologized without explaining. "Budget shifts," one said, though Evan had seen the permits filed and the funds appropriated. The inspector, who'd misplaced a signature, misplaced a different one, this time on a different job. Reggie at the lumberyard found his smile again, but stock was tight in all the ways that meant someone bigger had leaned across a desk. At the kitchen table that night, Ava stacked papers into straight lines. She'd filed Tasha's boundary letter with campus, with the city, with a quiet office on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like old policy. She kept the recordings in 3 places. "We can't stop the rain," she said, tapping the stack, "but we can build gutters." Evan snorted. "You're talking like a contractor now." "I'm talking like someone who likes dry floors." Tasha called Tuesday. "Hearing set for Wednesday morning," she said. "Civil protection order. You'll both testify. He'll show. He always does." "Will it help?" Ava asked. "It's a door," Tasha said. "It swings because a judge puts hinges on it. It doesn't keep out the weather. But it tells everyone which side is mine." They didn't sleep much that night. Evan lay awake and watched streetlights sift through the maple leaves in moving squares. He thought of his grandmother, of the line she'd painted over the coat rack, of the 1,000 small ways a house teaches you to be a person. Across the hall, Ava stared up at the faint pattern on the ceiling and practiced the sentences she needed to say out loud in a room with a seal on the wall. Court smelled like old carpet and nervous deodorant. The judge was a woman with grey hair pulled into an efficient knot and eyes that held a lot of maps. Grant arrived with 2 lawyers and an expression that could sell a storm as a scenic route. He watched Ava as if waiting for a cue. He didn't get one. Tasha's hand on Ava's elbow was warm and ordinary. "In and out," she murmured. "We speak in complete sentences. We use verbs with teeth. We do not debate." When it was time, Ava stood. The disc at her collar wasn't live. The rules said you gave your word beneath the flag. She spoke it steady anyway. She told the judge about the car that idled, the envelope shoved through a chained door, the letter that used the word strangers like a weapon. She played the Pike Place recording, his phase, her home, the line about doors that both of them had meant as prophecy and punishment. Evan watched her hands, how they held the paper without trembling, and understood he was seeing a person step into the house of her own voice. Grant's lawyer objected twice and was overruled twice. Grant himself asked for the chance to speak. The judge allowed it. He stepped forward with the kind of courtesy that makes people mistake motive for manners. "My daughter is 20, he began. "We disagree deeply about what is in her best interest. Any contact she's received from me was out of concern. If my contractors and acquaintances made independent decisions about Mr. Washington, I cannot control the free market. I ask the court to recognize that what looks like pressure is in fact a parent's imperfect love." The judge looked at him for a long beat. "Sir," she said, "love does not require surveillance." She turned to Ava. "Miss Danvers, do you have anything further?" Ava lifted the photo of the note they'd found under Evan's wiper. Doors close. No signature, but the handwriting was familiar as a monogram. "Just this," she said. The judge read it and set it down like a useless tool. "All right," she said, and her voice became weather of a different kind. "I'm granting the order. Mr. Danvers, you will not contact Miss Danvers directly or through third parties. You will not surveil her or cause others to. You will not interfere with Mr. Washington's work or contracts. You will stay 500 feet from their residence, and, for the record, the court takes very seriously what interference in a person's employment looks like and how we prove it. If you violate any of this, we will see you again, and you will not like the consequences." Grant's jaw rippled. He schooled it. "Understood, Your Honor." Tasha squeezed Ava's elbow. Evan's breath left him in a quiet, shaky exhale he hoped no one heard. On the courthouse steps, cameras looked like birds pretending to be leaves. Grant paused as if considering an exit line, then decided against it. He met his daughter's gaze across a polite gulf the law had suddenly made visible. Something in his face broke and remade itself. He nodded once to her, or to the inevitable, and turned away. They didn't celebrate. They bought a bag of oranges from a corner grocer and went home to make the house smell like sun. The order didn't change the clouds, but it changed where they could stand under them. Evan's phone still pinged with delays and sudden regrets, but not as many and not as confident. Reggie called with a small victory. "Got a pallet. Don't ask me how," he said. "You want it?" Evan laughed into the receiver, surprised at the sound. "I want it." Mrs. Dobbs from down the block knocked with a pie and a church bulletin. "We need the fellowship hall floor fixed before the next fish fry," she said. "The deacons voted. They want you, and they already voted to pay on delivery, not 60 days out, because we believe in the man doing the work." Evan blinked hard enough to turn his eyes into quiet lakes. "Yes, ma'am." Ava's world shifted too. The art department announced a small student show in a hallway that had seen better funding, and she submitted 3 pieces without telling anyone. She called them thresholds, charcoal studies of a strike plate biting into wood grain, of a hand steady on a wooden spoon in a swirl of roux, of a porch light making a soft gold circle in the rain. On opening night, Tasha stood for a long time in front of the porch light and then bought it with a credit card and a grin. "I like my rooms to remember how courage looks," she said. The campus newspaper ran a profile the next day. Student artist turns domestic details into defiance. The photo caught Ava mid-laugh, her mouth open, unafraid. When she brought the paper home, Evan pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny brass pig. Famous, he teased. Local, she corrected, and kissed his jaw in thanks for the soft ribbing. There were still days that bit. A gutter seam failed and sent a dirty waterfall behind the kitchen cabinets. The pallet Reggie had found turned out to be just shy of what the job required, and Evan had to rip and sister joists to make a picture frame where the lumber didn't match. Ava stared at a blank page for an hour and thought she'd used up all her sentences. But then the seam got soldered, the floor lay true, the page eventually accepted a line, then 19 more. On a warm Saturday that smelled like wet cedar and cut lemons, they built a door. Evan planed the edge until it whispered. He mortised the hinges into the jamb, showing her how to score the outline and tap the chisel so it bit to depth without jumping the line. He sanded until her palm slid and found no splinters. Ava chose the paint, a quiet blue you only saw after rain. She brushed the panels and left the rails unpainted so the wood could remember what it was. "What do we call it?" she asked as they tipped it into place. Lifting together on the count of 3. "Ah, no," he said, grinning. "Ah, yes," she shot back. He laughed. Both. He set the hinge pins. She seated the latch. When the strike clicked for the first time, it sounded like a chord ringing true. They stood back. The new door made the house look like it had decided something. "See this?" Evan said, pressing her finger to the bevel where wood met wood. "This angle keeps the weather out and lets the door swing clean. Somebody figured that out 500 years ago and got it so right we still use it. That's what I want for us. Things that last because somebody paid attention." She leaned her forehead into his shoulder. "I'm paying attention." A text chimed. Ava looked. "Unknown number. I won't come near your house again. I will not contact you. I will not instruct anyone to do so. I am, however, still your father." She stared at the words, then typed, "I am, however, still myself." She hit send and blocked the number. Then she forwarded the text to Tasha and to the folder with the plain name. When she set her phone face down on the counter, she didn't feel hunted. She felt busy. At dusk, he lit the porch light. It cast a circle like a vow on the new paint. Neighbours drifted by, the way neighbourhoods do when a thing turns out pretty. Mrs. Dobbs pronounced the blue Sunday morning nice. A kid on a scooter ran his fingers reverently over the wood and looked up like he'd touched a ship. Inside, the house breathed deeper. The sign over the coat rack, the one his grandmother painted, caught the last of the light. "Take care of the house, and the house takes care of you." They put the kettle on, and while it sang, Ava took down the sign, wiped it clean, and added a line in small, neat letters with a brush she used for detail work. "Take care of each other, too." They ate gumbo at the table with their knees touching and talked about nothing important and everything that mattered. Tomorrow, he'd start the fellowship hall. Tomorrow, she'd prep canvases for a bigger piece, a triptych of hands doing ordinary sacred things, turning a deadbolt, folding oranges into a bowl, lacing boots by a door. They would set alarms. They would forget to hit snooze. They would make lists and cross some things off and let some things wait, because you cannot fix every seam in one day and still be a person with a laugh. Later, they stepped out onto the porch, 2 mugs steaming. The new door at their backs was cool under Ava's palm. The maple whispered. The city hummed. She turned to him. "Was it worth it?" she asked. Not because she doubted, but because she liked the sound of them deciding together. He looked at the light, at the street, at her. "Every hinge," he said. She tipped her head until her temple fit under his chin and let the answer settle where a fear used to live. In the dark window they were a reflection framed by the door they'd built. No plaque on it, no initials carved, just work and choice and blue paint drying to a soft shine. The world was still the world, sharp sometimes, unfair sometimes, too much and not enough. But the house was theirs. The life was too. When they finally went inside, the latch clicked again, neat and certain. Some doors close, some you close. This one did both, and the difference was everything.